The sun rose over a busy city, while people walked to work without knowing that their lives would change forever. Children played in the narrow streets and shopkeepers opened their doors to welcome the morning breeze under a clear sky. Hiroshima was a place of history and culture, where families shared meals and dreams in the early light of day. No one could imagine that a single moment would erase everything they loved and turn the bright world into ash. The birds sang in the trees, while the river flowed quietly through the heart of a city that felt safe. Thousands of hearts beat together in a rhythm of peace as the morning hours passed with a sense of calm. Deep in the distance, a mechanical sound began to grow louder as a silver bird flew high above the clouds. People looked up at the sky with curiosity because they did not understand the danger that was coming for them. The city was alive with the sounds of daily life, but a hidden clock was ticking toward a dark ending. Soon, the bright blue sky would witness a fire that no human had ever seen in the history of Earth. The clock reached the fatal hour when the air turned cold, and a heavy silence fell over the entire landscape. A metal door opened high in the air to release a heavy burden that would fall silently toward the ground. People continued their walk while the shadows grew longer, and the heat of the summer sun touched their tired faces. Time seemed to slow down as the metal object descended through the atmosphere with a purpose that was very cruel. No warning was given to the innocent souls who were simply living their lives in the center of the target. The river reflected the silver light of the plane, which was already turning away to escape the coming great storm. A sudden flash of white light covered the horizon and blinded the eyes of everyone who was looking toward heaven. In that very second, the world became a white canvas, where nothing else existed except for a terrible bright heat. The energy of 1,000 stars was released upon the ground, and the ground began to shake with a roar. Everything that existed before was about to be rewritten by a power that humans could not yet fully understand today. Breakfast was served on low wooden tables, while mothers checked the clothes of their children before they went to school. Old men sat on benches near the water to discuss the weather and the hopes for a better future tomorrow. Bicycles moved along the dusty paths, and the sound of bells echoed through the air with a very soft melody. Flowers bloomed in small gardens, and the smell of fresh tea drifted from the windows of the local tea houses. It was a Monday morning like any other morning, where the routine of life provided a sense of deep comfort. Workers hurried to the factories and students carried their heavy books while they talked about their favorite games and stories. The world felt solid and real with mountains in the distance and a sky that was blue and very wide. No one knew that this was the last time they would see the faces of the people they loved dearly. A quiet peace covered the streets, but a shadow was moving across the sun to bring a very long night. Deep secrets were hidden in the metal shell that was falling from the sky to change the path of history. Far away, in a secret desert, men worked in silence to build a weapon that could end all the wars. Scientists calculated numbers and formulas, while they tried to unlock the power that was hidden inside a tiny little atom. Millions of dollars were spent in the dark to create a machine of destruction that the world had never imagined. The project was a ghost that lived in the shadows, and only a few leaders knew what was really happening. They tested the fire in the sands of New Mexico and saw a light that was brighter than the sun. Fear and pride were mixed together as they realized that they had become the creators of a very dark power. Letters were sent and orders were signed in cold rooms while the fate of a distant city was being decided. The machine was ready, and the pilots were trained to fly a mission that would change the soul of humanity. They loaded the heavy bomb into the belly of the plane and prepared to cross the wide and blue ocean. A secret was about to be revealed to the world, and it would leave a scar that would never heal. The bomb was named Little Boy, but its heart was filled with a fire that was older than the world. It was made of metal and wires, and a core of uranium that was waiting to explode with great force. Engineers checked every part of the mechanism to ensure that the mission would be successful on that very dark day. The weapon sat in the dark hold of the aircraft while the engines hummed with a low and steady sound. It was a masterpiece of science and a monster of war that was designed to destroy everything in its path. No one had ever used such a force against a living city, and the consequences were still a great mystery. The metal skin of the bomb was cold to the touch, but it carried the heat of a billion fires. It was a tool of ultimate power that was born from the minds of men who wanted to stop fighting. The pilots flew through the clouds with the heavy weight of the future resting on their young and tired shoulders. They were heading toward a destination that would become a graveyard for 100,000 people in a single moment. The leaders looked at maps and chose a target that was flat and surrounded by hills to maximize the blast. Hiroshima was a military center, but it was also a city where many thousands of ordinary people lived their lives. It had been spared from previous fires so that the scientists could measure the power of the new atomic weapon. The choice was cold and calculated based on weather and the clear view of the ground from the high sky. They wanted to see the full effect of the pressure and the heat on the buildings and the human bodies. A circle was drawn on the map, and the center of the city became the point of no return today. The weather planes flew ahead to check the clouds, and they reported that the sky was clear over the target. The message was sent, and the plane turned its nose toward the city that was waking up for the day. It was a perfect morning for a tragedy that would be remembered for the rest of human time on Earth. The target was locked, and the final approach began, while the people below continued to dream of their future. The president sat at his desk and thought about the lives that would be lost if the war continued longer. He believed that this strike was the only way to force a surrender and save the lives of his soldiers. The decision was heavy, and it weighed on the conscience of everyone who knew the truth about the secret bomb. Orders were given, and the gears of the military machine began to move with a force that was very strong. There was no way to stop the mission once the plane had taken off into the dark and lonely night. The pilots knew their task, but they did not know the full scale of the horror they were about to bring. They followed the coordinates and watched the compass while the stars watched them from the deep and silent black space. The fuel burned, and the distance closed as the sun began to rise over the islands of the Eastern Sea. A line was crossed, and a choice was made that would haunt the world for many generations to come now. The finger was on the trigger, and the world was about to change its face in a very sudden way. The target came into view through the glass of the plane, and the crosshair settled on the T-shaped AA bridge. The bomb bay doors opened with a mechanical roar, and the heavy weapon fell away into the thin blue air. For 43 seconds, the bomb tumbled through the sky, while a timer counted down to the moment of impact. The plane climbed high and fast to escape the shockwave that would soon follow the release of the Great Fire. Below, the city was calm, and the streets were full of people who were looking at the tiny silver speck. A child pointed at the sky while a mother held his hand, and they wondered what the small object was. The wind whistled past the metal casing, and the internal fuses prepared to spark the final and deadly reaction. The seconds disappeared like sand in a glass, and the distance to the ground became shorter with every passing breath. Gravity pulled the weapon down with a steady hand, while the history of the world waited for the coming flash. The clock struck the final beat, and the air itself was about to be torn apart by a giant force. A purple light filled the sky, and the temperature rose to thousands of degrees in a fraction of a second. The flash was so bright that it burned the shadows of people into the stone walls behind them where they stood. Buildings turned into dust, and the air became a wall of fire that moved faster than the sound of thunder. Clothes caught on fire, and the skin of the people melted away as they were caught in the intense heat. The shockwave traveled across the city and flattened everything in its path like a giant hand crushing a small toy. Trees were uprooted, and the water in the river began to boil as the heat reached the bottom of Earth. A massive cloud of smoke and fire rose into the sky and formed the shape of a giant gray mushroom. Silence followed the roar as the heart of the city was replaced by a wasteland of gray and black ash. The light had gone, but the heat remained, and the world was now a place of shadows and of pain. Nothing could survive the center of the sun that had fallen to the ground in the middle of the city. Where there were houses and schools, there was now only a desert of broken bricks and twisted metal and smoke. The black rain began to fall from the sky, and it stained the ruins with a liquid that was very toxic. Survivors wandered through the smoke like ghosts, with their arms held out to stop the pain of their burned skin. They cried for water, but the river was full of bodies, and the wells were filled with the gray dust. The silence was broken only by the sound of the wind and the soft moans of the people who suffered. Families were separated, and children searched for their parents in a landscape that they no longer recognized as their home. The hospital was a ruin, and the doctors were gone, so there was no one to help the many wounded. A thick layer of dust covered the world, and the sun was hidden behind a veil of dark and heavy smoke. The city that was alive a few minutes ago was now a graveyard that stretched as far as the eye. The scale of the destruction was so total that it seemed like the world had come to a final end. Those who survived the flash soon began to feel a sickness that came from a hidden and very deadly poison. Their hair fell out and their bodies became weak as the radiation destroyed them from the inside of their souls. They were the hibakusha, and they would carry the physical and the mental scars of this day for many years. Stories of loss and of courage emerged from the ruins as people tried to help each other in the dark. 1,000 paper cranes were folded by a young girl who hoped for a miracle that would never really come. The world watched in horror as the news of the bomb spread across the nations and the oceans of Earth. Scientists studied the effects of the radiation, and they realized that the weapon had a long and very cruel reach. Life slowly returned to the burned ground, but the memory of the fire remained in the hearts of the survivors. They promised to tell their stories so that the world would never use such a weapon against humans ever again. The pain was deep, but the spirit of the people was stronger than the fire that had tried to destroy. Hiroshima was not a mistake of nature, but a result of human science and the choices of the many leaders. It showed the world that we now have the power to destroy our own species in a very short time. We build walls and we build bombs, but we often forget the value of the lives that we are taking. The ruins of the atomic dome stand today as a reminder of the day when the sky fell on us. Peace is a fragile thing that must be protected with the wisdom of the heart and the strength of mind. We must look at the past to understand the future and to ensure that the flash never returns to sky. The shadows on the walls tell a story of a moment when the light of humanity was almost lost forever. Every decision we make has a consequence that ripples through time and affects the lives of those who come next. We are the masters of our fate and the keepers of the fire that can either create or destroy us. Is the greatest danger the weapon we created, or is it the human heart that decides to pull the trigger?